If you feel that something still vibrates between you, it's because there is still a story being written in the invisible. Welcome, ancient soul. If your heart still beats for someone who has distanced themselves, if the signs don't cease, if the dreams still come, if the feeling of connection persists, even in the most absolute silence, then this video is indeed for you. Maybe you are tired of trying to understand. Maybe you promised yourself to forget. But something deeper, something that doesn't come from the mind, keeps calling. And it's not neediness, it's soul code. Today we will talk about a delicate and powerful topic, that connection that doesn't fade away, even when everything seems to have ended. That man you feel still thinks of you, but is stuck in an invisible, energetic, spiritual cycle, and it can only be broken when you awaken. Yes, he hasn't forgotten you, but the reason you're still not together may not be what you imagine. So take a deep breath, embrace yourself, open your heart, not to illusion, but to the deep listening of the soul. Today can be the beginning of a turning point within you. If this topic has already touched something inside, subscribe to the channel now. Share this video with someone who also feels this inexplicable connection, and come with me. Because today we will dive deep, face what few have the courage to confront, and perhaps discover that you are the key to liberating not only him, but yourself as well. There are connections that defy logic, bonds that survive time, distance, silence, people who leave your life but not your energy field. You try to move on, you pray, you cry, you rationalize, but he remains there, not in the physical, but in the invisible, present in thoughts, dreams, emotional triggers. It's as if something between you is suspended, unfinished, vibrating in another plane of existence. You feel that it was not just a relationship, it was a meeting, and no matter what the world says, that it's over, that he has moved on, that you need to forget, there is something deeper trying to show you that it's not about moving on or forgetting. It's about understanding, deciphering what this bond wants to reveal to you. Often the pain you feel is not just longing, it's a spiritual pain, the feeling of having lost a part of yourself, or of not being able to fully return to yourself after the separation. And this doesn't happen to everyone. Most people manage to move on, to live, to reconnect with new stories. But with you, it seems different. Because it is different. Maybe he is far away. Maybe he is with someone else. Maybe he has blocked you. But still, you feel that something in him is stuck, that something is preventing him, that he is not at peace. You notice it in the silences, in the looks that linger in memory, in the songs that still play at random moments, in the accidental encounters that feel more like calls from destiny. And then you ask yourself, why do I still feel this? Why does it seem like he still thinks of me, even from a distance? Does he feel it too? You are not crazy, and you are not alone. Many awakened souls are going through the same dilemma. Relationships that seem to have ended in the physical world, but continue to reverberate in the spiritual world. Connections interrupted by patterns, traumas, fears, interferences, and that leave a deep trace in the energy field of those who feel more. And usually, the one who feels more is you who have more awareness, who carries more sensitivity, who listens to the signs, who feels in the body what the soul has not yet been able to translate into words. What hurts is not just the absence, it's the feeling that something was left unfinished, that something between the two of you got lost in the midst of a misunderstood process, that maybe he is stuck in repetitions, in old fears, in emotional addictions, that maybe he is trying to live a normal life, when in reality he is denying something much greater that he feels. And that's where the true conflict begins. Because on the outside, he seems fine. But on the inside, he hasn't forgotten you. He is just stuck in emotional cycles that have repeated for much longer than this life, stuck in beliefs that prevent him from accessing his own heart, stuck in inherited patterns, in wounds that never healed, stuck in a version of himself that he learned to be, but that doesn't reflect who he is at his core. And you feel that he wants to break free from this, that he tries, but he can't. And this impotence also hurts you, because there is something in you that sees him, that recognizes the soul behind the armor, that knows he is not just what he did or didn't do, that knows there is a love there, even if hidden, but also knows it's not your job to save him. So you live this paradox. You feel love, but you need to protect yourself. You feel longing, but you need to distance yourself. You feel connection, but you need to move on. And amidst all this, a question begins to arise. Why is this happening to me? What is this love trying to show me? And more deeply, why does it seem that only I see? This question is not a punishment. It's a calling. The pain you feel is not the end. It's the beginning of a journey. And the more you try to silence it, the more the universe repeats the signs. Because it's not just about romantic love. It's about soul, about awakening, about healing ancestral patterns, of deep transformation. Something that goes beyond being together or staying apart. Something that touches internal structures, hidden wounds, memories that do not belong solely to this life. If you feel you are experiencing this, even without understanding, even without having answers, you are not wasting your time. You are being called to see deeper, to become aware of what this connection represents, and perhaps, just perhaps, to discover that this man you love is waiting for a key that only you can turn. But this key is not found by trying to rescue him. It is found within you. There are moments when life seems to place us in front of a disconnection that hurts more than any spoken word or unfulfilled gesture. A silent separation, an inexplicable distance, an absence that seems to scream. It's as if something has been ripped away without warning, leaving only an emptiness and a silence that is hard to translate. But this kind of rupture, when it comes to a soul connection, carries with it more than personal pain. It carries a spiritual calling. Often, the end of a relationship between souls that recognize each other is not a mistake, but a necessity. It's as if the universe is saying, now you need to separate so that something deeper can be revealed. But the ego doesn't understand this. The ego wants control, wants answers, wants guarantees. And when it doesn't receive any of these things, it falls into despair. It starts looking for blame, reliving scenes, feeding illusions, or closing itself off in pain. In this scenario, confusion sets in. You try to understand why everything crumbled if there was love. You try to rationalize the reasons that led to the distance. You try to find meaning in contradictory actions. But the more you try, the more you lose yourself, because it's not in the mental realm that this story is explained. It is in the spiritual. There is a blind spot that many people don't realize. What seems like an ending can actually be a redirection. The love that seemed to have come to an end has actually entered a phase of transmutation. And this process requires separation, because the pain you feel is not just for his absence, but for the mirror that this absence activates within you. The other disappears, and you are forced to face everything that was projected: expectations, unhealed wounds, insecurities that were dormant. And the same happens with him. Even if he seems distant, cold, or even indifferent, he is also facing something. But the cycle he is trapped in may have much older roots. It may be a pattern of escape, a fear of his own feelings, an emotional addiction to unstable relationships. He may be unconsciously repeating the same script that distances him from everything that is true. And this repetition is not just psychological, it is energetic. It's as if he is inside an internal prison from which he cannot escape because he cannot see. And this is where an important revelation comes in. The pain of separation, as cruel as it may seem, is often the only way to break this cycle. When two souls meet with potential for expansion, but are still caught up in destructive patterns, the separation becomes an opportunity for purification. It is in this interval that the soul can begin to hear what the ego would not allow it to listen to. In his case, the universe may have been trying to speak for a long time, through signs, encounters, synchronicities. But if he is trapped in layers of protection, pride, or self-deception, none of this reaches him clearly. He feels something, but he doesn't understand. He remembers, but tries to ignore. He gets emotional, but hides it. And this traps him even more, because the more he resists what he feels, the stronger the feeling of emptiness becomes. He is living an inner war. And you feel this. You feel when he thinks of you. You sense when something within him stirs. You realize that even from a distance, something between you still pulses. But you also feel that he is stuck. And this blockage does not depend on you, because only he can take the step toward his own truth. Only he can decide to break the cycle. But there is something you can do. And it is not to chase after him. It is not to try to convince him. It is to access your own consciousness. Because as long as he is trapped, the energy between you will continue to spin in the same spot, a point of waiting, of stagnation, of repetitions. And this energy, if not transmuted, begins to generate suffering. It starts to make the body sick, confuse the mind, exhaust the spirit. You need to understand that this connection, no matter how intense it is, was not made to keep you in suffering. It was made to awaken you. And this awakening begins when you accept that you can no longer insist on a movement that repeats itself. When you recognize that the cycle needs to be broken and that this begins with you. When you choose to interrupt the pattern of constant vigilance, of silent waiting, of internal pressure. When you stop asking why he doesn't come back and start asking what in you is still waiting for him to return. At this point, a key begins to turn, the key of liberation. And that is when the universe begins to respond differently. Because when you change your frequency, the frequency of the connection also changes. He may not understand rationally, but he will feel it. Because the soul senses when the other soul begins to free itself. This is the spiritual turning point that few have the courage to face. The deconstruction of romantic love as an ideal of salvation. The recognition that the other is not responsible for healing what you yourself need to look at. And the openness to a higher truth. Only when you free yourself from the cycle can the cycle finally dissolve. There comes a moment in the journey when pain no longer serves as a sign of love, but as a warning of imbalance. It is when the heart, weary of repeating the same cycle of waiting, rejection, and longing, begins to seek something else. Silence, retreat, peace. The body gives signs. The soul asks for space. The mind begins to question what once seemed certain. And it is at this point that the healing process begins. Healing, however, is not a straight line. It does not come with easy promises or immediate answers. It begins when you stop trying to understand the other and start listening to yourself. When you stop fighting against what was and begin to open up to what needs to be rebuilt within you. This is the beginning of a deep retreat, which has nothing to do with isolation, but with reconnection. For a long time, you believed that he needed to come back for everything to make sense. That the story between you would only have value if it continued. But now, something within you begins to realize that perhaps the most important thing is not the reunion with him, but the reunion with parts of yourself that were left aside in the process. Parts that were shaped by the fear of being abandoned, by the attempt to please, by the effort to be seen, by the desire to be chosen. And all of this needs to be looked at with sincerity. The retreat is not about giving up. It is about interrupting the movement of insistence that kept you away from your own essence. It is about silencing the noise of projections, expectations, and idealizations. It is the moment when you turn inward, not as an escape, but as a return to your inner voice, a return to your center, a return to your soul. It is in this space of silence that true energetic realignment begins. When you stop emitting vibrations of neediness, fear, and urgency, and start vibrating presence, acceptance, and awareness, the energy changes. And with it, everything around changes. Because the energy you sustain within yourself is the same that nourishes the connection with the other. When you find balance, the relationship ceases to be a mirror of pain and becomes a neutral field where love can finally breathe. The greatest illusion of this type of connection is believing that the other needs to change for everything to be all right, that he needs to awaken, understand, take responsibility. But the truth is that transformation begins with you. And when it begins, the space between you reorganizes. Sometimes this means reconnection. Other times, it means liberation. But in all cases, it means healing. Healing deepens when you stop seeking external signs and start trusting the internal movement. When you understand that you no longer need to know what he feels, what he thinks, what he is living, because you are whole, and a whole soul does not depend on the presence or absence of anyone to feel peace. This is the spiritual maturity that arises after energetic mourning, after the silent crying, after confronting one's own shadows. When you go through this crossing with honesty, something within you changes forever. It is no longer about him. It is about you, about what you have learned, about who you have become. about the new frequency you have begun to sustain. Longing may still exist, but it no longer consumes you. Memories may arise, but they no longer control you. Love may continue to live, but it no longer hurts, because now it is not a lack. It is a silent presence that demands nothing. In this new state, love ceases to be an invisible contract of suffering and becomes a vibration that liberates. You stop waiting, you stop watching, you stop trying to understand, and you begin to live with lightness, with presence, with truth. And without realizing it, you start to attract new experiences that reflect this new internal state. More conscious relationships, more balanced connections, cleaner mirrors. This is the true reunion. Not the reunion with who left, but the reunion with who you became by crossing his absence. Awakening is not a magical event. It is a silent process. One day you wake up and realize that you no longer need answers, that all you needed was to return to yourself. It is at this point that you understand. Love was not lost. It simply changed form. It matured. It stopped being a prison to become an expansion. And even if the other is still trapped in his own cycles, you are no longer. You have moved on. You chose life. And this choice, more than any other, is what breaks the cycle of pain. There is a moment, after the pain, the mourning, and the silence, when something within you awakens. It is not immediate. It is not euphoric. It is not a sudden enlightenment. It is something more subtle and powerful, an internal memory of who you have always been before everything, before the connection, before the breakup, before the expectations, a feeling of return. You return to occupy your own body. You return to feel your own soul. You return to recognize yourself. This is the encounter with the higher self, a state of consciousness in which you begin to see yourself beyond the stories, the traumas, the unfulfilled desires. You begin to observe yourself with more compassion, with more clarity, with more maturity, and you realize that everything that happened, including the pain, was part of a greater plan for expansion. Nothing was in vain, neither love, nor absence, nor waiting. The higher self does not deny the story. It understands it. It observes the movements of the ego without judgment. It recognizes the needs that held you back, the fears that paralyzed you, the impulses that made you chase after things. But it also recognizes the strength that emerged from all of this, because it was at the bottom of the abyss that you began to build the foundation of your true autonomy. Not the superficial autonomy of someone who pretends not to care, but the deep autonomy of someone who no longer depends on the validation of others to feel alive. This turning point happens when you stop trying to control the timing of things, when you let go of the mental script of how everything should have been, when you accept that the other may not be ready, and even so, you move on. Because now you understand that you did not come to this world to wait for someone to figure themselves out. You came to remember who you are, and in remembering, you reconnect with your power. Personal power is not about pride, about showing strength, or about hiding vulnerabilities. It is about presence, about being whole with yourself, even when external circumstances do not match your desires. It is about knowing where your responsibility ends and where the other's choices begin. It is about no longer losing yourself, trying to save someone who did not ask to be saved. From this point on, the energy you emanate changes completely. You no longer send waves of demand, lack, or neediness. You emanate firmness, clarity, and mature love. You become a magnetic field that attracts what is on the same frequency. And this magnetism is silent. It does not need to be proven, shown, or forced. It simply is. It arises from your internal truth. It is in this state that you understand that love does not need to manifest in the way you imagine to be real. True love is not lost. It transforms. And when you access this understanding, the fear of loss disappears, because you no longer depend on a specific ending to validate what you felt. The feeling existed, was lived, transformed you, and for that reason, it fulfilled its role. Often, it is at this turning point that the other begins to feel something different too. Not because you did something, but because you stopped doing, because you stopped vibrating pain and started vibrating truth, because the connection between you now is no longer sustained by need, but by authenticity. And it is in this cleaner space that any reunion, if it is meant to happen, can come from a much higher place. But the most important thing is not whether they come back or not. The most important thing is that now you are at peace. You respect yourself. You listen to yourself. You value yourself. You understood that loving someone does not mean diminishing yourself to fit into their life. It means honoring yourself to the point of knowing that, if it is meant to be together, it will be as equals. And if not, that's okay, because your path does not stop. This is the true awakening, when the story ceases to be about them and becomes about you. When you stop living for a connection and start moving from your own light. When you understand that life is always in your favor, even when it seems to be taking something from you. Because in truth, it is giving back. Giving back your strength, your sovereignty, your freedom. You are not the same person who started this journey. Something in you has died, yes, but something much more grand has been born. And this new being that emerges on the other side of pain is someone who no longer begs, no longer waits, no longer sacrifices themselves to be accepted. It is someone who knows their own worth, who recognizes what they carry, who walks with their head held high and their heart at peace. This is the true victory, not their return, but the return to yourself. Getting to this point has not been easy. It is not simple to dive into this kind of pain and come out stronger on the other side. It is not light to look at your own wounds, to review choices, to accept silences, to face loneliness, but it is necessary. And now, you are in another place within yourself, a firmer, clearer, more whole place, an internal space where emotional dependence no longer rules, where love is no longer synonymous with sacrifice, and where the presence of someone is no longer a condition for your happiness. The person you have become is no longer driven by the need to be remembered, chosen, or understood. You have learned to remember yourself, to choose yourself every day, to understand yourself in your ups and downs, in your contradictions and vulnerabilities. You have understood that true love starts when you look at yourself with truth, when you stop negotiating your essence for crumbs of attention. When you understand that being at peace is worth more than any forced attempt at reconnection. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Not to them, not to the world, not to yourself. Everything you lived, everything you felt, everything that was exposed and stripped away in this process was real. It does not need to be validated by anyone. You loved, yes. You believed. You gave what you had of the most genuine. And that was not weakness. It was courage. The courage to feel deeply. The courage not to shut down when the other pulled away. The courage to remain open-hearted even in pain. But now, courage takes on a new form. It transforms into the strength to withdraw, into the firmness of moving forward without bitterness, in the maturity of closing cycles without needing to destroy what was good. Because it's not about erasing history, but giving it the place it deserves, the place of learning, of turning points, of transformation. And in this new state of awareness, you become a different mirror for the world, a mirror that reflects integrity, that does not seduce with neediness, but inspires with presence, that does not seek to fill a void, but shares overflow. This is the magnetism of the healed soul, a vibrational field that attracts not by lack, but by completeness. And this field touches those who are ready, not those who merely wish, but those who have the courage to walk alongside someone who no longer abandons themselves. Perhaps at some point in time, they will feel this new field. Perhaps they will sense that something has changed, that the frequency between you no longer sustains the old dynamics. Perhaps they will awaken, perhaps not. But what matters is that now you know. Your journey does not depend on that. Your path is no longer conditioned to someone else's response. You have put yourself first, not out of selfishness, but out of wisdom. And this decision changes everything. If this content resonated with you, if at any moment you saw yourself in these words, subscribe to this channel. Here, we do not talk about love to feed illusions. We speak to those who are ready to live love as it truly is, a process of healing, of expansion, and of returning to the truth of the soul. Share this video with someone you know is going through this process, someone who, like you, feels but does not understand, loves but gets lost, someone who needs to know they are not alone. And now I want to hear from you. In the comments, write, "I break the cycle and return to myself." This will be your vibrational commitment to the new version of yourself, the version that no longer waits, that no longer diminishes itself, that no longer abandons itself for anyone. The version that recognizes that everything starts from within outwards, that true love does not bind, does not demand, does not plead. It guides, it teaches, it frees. You are more than the pain you felt. You are more than the story you lived. You are the link between what was and what can still be. And now, what will be depends only on you. Welcome back to yourself.